All right, another playthrough over, another hashtag not a tier list on the books. Let's go ahead and rank how I would tier the cast of Fire Emblem Sacred Zones, specifically just in how they performed in my most recent draft Iron Man. So as you'll notice, I specifically only have the units that I drafted listed here. So let's go over them. Erica, I'm tempted to put Erica in F tier. I feel like she was really, really bad. Erica is always pretty bad until you get her sacred twin. What is it, Siglend, right? You get her sacred twin, right? And then she can still sort of function as an enemy phase, or not an enemy phase. God, no, she would die on enemy phase as a player phase unit. Just a delete button for a monster, and most maps have, dangerous monsters you would like to delete. But Erica was just such a fucking dead weight throughout the mid game and even the early game when, enemies aren't that great and Erica's kind of able to keep up. I feel like in most playthroughs here, she just sort of like, I didn't care for her. I didn't even really get that much utility out of the rescue dropping either. I'm going to put her in. She was easily my worst unit, with the exception, of course, of we'll get to her, but yeah, I'm gonna put Erica in F tier. I don't think she's an F tier unit. I think that she can do like C and D tier things if you use her as a delete button, but I'm putting Erica in F tier because she was easily by far my worst unit of the units who survived. Seth, I'm very happy to have had Seth. I'm putting him in S tier. Seth is by far the best unit in the game. I drafted him immediately. First pick, first round, first pick type deal. And I was very, very happy with that. I think somebody mentioned in chat, can Seth handle it? The answer is always yes. Seth can do whatever you want him to do on the map. I still used him in the end game. He was part of the boss kill on Lyon, my warp skip on Lyon. But he maintained he retained usefulness like throughout the entire playthrough. He was very, very good at the beginning to just sort of Seth stomp through the first 8 chapters. God, if I didn't have him on the Fog of War map, I don't know what I would have done. He was obviously, free on that map, but even still, just like, he was great. Fucking Seth. Seth is amazing. I don't really know what I can say about Seth other than, like, Seth is Seth. Seth is the best unit in the game, and runs where you use Seth versus runs where you don't use Seth are so drastically different. I think even more so than any other Jagan in the series, even more than Titania, who is in the same, like, vein of, like, a Jagan with good growth, so she doesn't quote-unquote fall off. I think Seth is just a very, very centralizing part of this game. I think that if you lose Seth, then all of your other units feel so much worse because they have to be doing so much more that Seth could be doing. So even though, towards the mid-game and end-game, the narrative became more about Ross and, fucking just having Ross destroy everything, Seth was still there and shining, and Seth was doing important things. In the Last Hope, Seth took on a couple of people with silver axes, and this, that, and the other. Seth was just always there for me, and I'm appreciative of you. I love you, Seth. Who's next? Vanessa, F tier. Fucking, she died. She died in chapter 6, so she sucks. Bad unit. I don't know why anyone would think Vanessa is a good unit. She fucking dies to javelins and shamans, and fucking don't use her. Don't ever use Vanessa. Vanessa fucking sucks. Mulder. Talk about disappointing. I drafted Mulder as, like, another staff user or whatever, and I guess that was, like, fine in the beginning. But just, he was statistically bad, and I know that, like, magic on healers doesn't matter too much, but it does when it comes to, like, I made him a bishop and gave him Slayer, and nah. And, he couldn't warp reliably. He couldn't fit, like, his physic range forget his warp range, his physic range. It's like, what's the point? You know? What's the point of a physic this long? I feel like I'm just using the birthright staffs at that point. Like, oh no, I can heal from 2 tiles away. It became just sort of like the one range physic. Mulder, I guess he was kind of like, he had what, 1 point of defense more than Arthur in the defend map on Erica route, and that became relevant. But otherwise, like, D tier unit, trash tier unit. Let me just go ahead and fix my formatting up. There we go. You didn't see the white there. Ross the boss. Ross the boss. Fucking love this guy. This man. This absolute fucking unit. This guy absolutely, positively belongs in S tier, and I'm gonna do something bold. I'm gonna rank him above Seth. Not because I think he is a better unit objectively. I think that Seth is by far and away the best unit in the game, but I had so much fun with Ross, and, you know, recency bias, but in the end game, Ross was the most reliable answer to literally any problem the game threw at me. Just Ross time, crit, bam, don't even need a crit. Like, he killed the dragon, 1 round the dragon with no risk of death. 1 round, Morva, or not Morva, Morva's the dragon. Reeve? Whatever the guy is on Last Hope, with no risk of death even if he got crit. Like, this fucking unit, the narrative of the playthrough was just Ross is great, and Ross continues to be great, and fuck you. Meanwhile, Arthur I was incredibly impressed with. I'm going to go ahead and throw him in the A tier. I think that he was a better warp user than Mulder, just because magic is everything, and he capped out his magic, and he was able to warp very far, but not just that, like, he was a good physic user, he was a good combat unit, not just on player phase, but also he was decent on enemy phase against other magic users, in particular the eyeballs, because he had weapon triangle. He has Slayer, so I could just use him to delete some monsters. He was just incredibly fun to use. I'm probably biased. I'm definitely biased, because Arthur is one of my favorite units to use in Sacred Stones. I just find him very fun. But, yeah, A tier. Ephraim, honestly, if I had gone Ephraim route like I meant to, instead of just accidentally going Erica route, he probably would have been a pretty solid contributor, but as it stands, like, he kind of just didn't do anything. He was useful in the desert map, but other than that, like, I hate putting a unit that I like this much in C tier, and that I feel like probably belongs higher if I spent more time thinking about it, but we're just powering this out. And like, what did Ephraim really do for me? He was useful in like 2 chapters. 3. He was good in the egg chapter too. You know what? I think that's probably enough to push him up to B tier, because he was useful in the egg chapter. He was useful in retaking the castle to help train up Myrrh, and he was useful in the desert chapter. Like, that was a pretty big one. Obviously, you know, Dusel and Seth did most of the work in the desert chapter, and Ross got the boss kills. Ross the boss. Ross killer, the boss killer. But we're not talking about Ross, we're talking about Ephraim, and he was, like, decent, and, I mean, obviously, he was the MVP of, the chapter that Orson's in, and as a result, Orson gets put in D tier, because he was still good in that chapter. I feel like he did more work for me than Erica and Vanessa did, but, I'm gonna put him in D tier, D for dead. Actually, you know what? Fuck you. No, Orson goes in F tier because he turned evil. So it's Orson goes in fucker tier. Yeah, that's what the F stands for. You know, super strong, amazing, bad, cursed, dick sucker, fucking terrible. That's the letters. Those are the letters. S, A, B, C, D, E. There's no E. F. Garrick. I was disappointed with Garrick. Garrick was, like, good. It was a good filler unit. But Garrick is one of my favorite units to use, and I feel like maybe because of it's been a while since I've played Sacred Stones, I just expected him to perform better than he actually did. And as a result of that, I think he was definitely a better contributor than Ephraim, but I don't think he earns A tier. I feel like he's B tier. He was just like, you know, he was decent filler, but his biggest contribution was the support bonuses that he handed Ross. It ended up like transferring from the two-man show of Garrick and Ross to just the one-man show of Ross plus his sidekick Garrick, who would occasionally get to come out and play. There was like a 2-tile-wide choke point that the two of them choked in Darkling Woods, but other than that, I don't know. Tethys, obviously S tier. I'm gonna put her below Ross and Seth because I don't know, because that'll spark debate in the comments as to whether or not the dancer is better or the units they enable is better. So yeah, I mean that is sort of like the question about dancers, right? Because dancers are phenomenal. Being a dancer is where you want to be. Like it gives you automatic dancer utility. Dancers are amazing, especially in games like Fates and Awakening where you have like more movement options. But even in Sacred Stones where like your movement options are regular Canto and Rescue Drop, right? Just giving Seth an extra action is amazing. But does that make you better than Seth? Because there's the flexibility. Because what if you need to give Arthur an extra action in, for example, the warp skip to kill Leon? Or if you need to give Ross an extra action if like you need to 2-round a boss. And you don't want to do it on enemy phase, right? Like how much credit does the dancer get for the things that she enables? That's the real question. And I personally, I've gone back and forth about this. Like, I've debated some other Fire Emblem players, like, just not, as to whether or not, for example, Azura is the big one. Like, does Azura deserve to be, is Azura the best unit in, Fates? Because she's an early join dancer. And I used to think yes, but now I'm starting to lean that, like, I feel like dancers are given too much credit for what the units they enable do. Don't get me wrong, she still belongs in S tier, but I do think she's worse than Seth, and in this case also Ross, but in general, I think worse than Seth, because I think that there's the tendency to just be like, dancers are amazing, dancers are the best units. Do they get credit? And I think it varies from game to game also. Like in games with much more movement tech, like Three Houses, being a dancer, well, I guess like then, whoever your worst unit is gets to be the best dancer. And that's its own problem. But like, if there were a person who was just a dedicated dancer, right? Then I think they would get a lot more credit because of how many movement options there are and how much dancing enables that shit. I don't know, it's something interesting to think about. And, that's that. Let's talk about Vernock. I'm gonna put Vernock above Molder because I was very disappointed with Molder, and Vernock stole a bunch of items. In particular, there was like a Draco Shield and River of Regrets that he stole, and I was very happy with that. And yeah, he never really like did anything other than like basic thief utility, and I probably could have bought like chest and door keys. Well, I couldn't have bought door keys, but I could have used door keys and bought chest keys, right? But I don't know. It just it was nice not to have to think about that. I could just pile all of my keys on units who I had drafted or hadn't drafted. And also he stole the Draco Shield, and that's more utility than Molder. Dusel, again, he ran into the same problem with Garrick. Dusel is another one of my favorite units. I think of the Sacred Stones cast, like, Dusel, Garrick, and Arthur are 3 of my favorites. Probably my 3 favorites to use overall. Obviously, Seth is the best unit, but they are just sort of like, they're my core 3. I feel like most people have, like, units that they're just like, I use this unit every playthrough, I love this unit. And I feel like mine are Arthur, Garrick, and Dusel. And I mean, Garrick and Dusel are pretty self-explanatory. Like, they're some of the only quote-unquote pre-promotes. Garrick's not a pre-promote, but he could be one, who join you. But Dusel just sort of, like, ran into... Like, he joined much later as well. I think he probably, as a result of me not going Ephraim route, just, like, suffered so much that I'm putting him below Ephraim. A couple more units. Myrrh. This was my first time ever using Myrrh, and she had a fucking phenomenal first impression on me. I was a little disappointed that you can't repair the Dragonstone, especially since, like, I almost broke it in her joining map. So that really limited the amount that she could do things on the later maps. Like, for example, I wanted her to do some more in Darkling Woods, but, like, I really couldn't. She was just, like, a minor contributor in Darkling Woods, and it was mostly because, like, if she breaks the Dragon Stone, she just becomes fucking worthless. But that said, like, she was so fucking fun to use. Absolute A-tier unit. Absolute A-tier unit. Probably, like, realistically, she contributed less than, like, Garrick, Dusel, and Ephraim overall, but she basically made an entire chapter free, and it was incredibly fun to just be like, send her up into the throne room and destroy fucking everything. Yeah, that was a very, very fun thing to do. So, Myr, you get A tier. I don't think I can realistically justify putting her above Artur, and this is also probably somewhat Artur bias, because, like I just finished saying, like, he's a unit I really like using. But also, you know, Warp is incredibly useful, staff utility, long physic range, just Slayer, just there's so much, but, we're not talking about him, we're talking about her, and she was also just... I probably should have been more careful training her initially. There were definitely some moments where I was like, oh, she almost died, but, that's life for you, and Myr is fun to use. Cyrene is the last unit to talk about, and I feel like Cyrene is underrated in general because she is, like, pretty weak for the time that she joins, and in a vacuum. You look at Cyrene, you look at the time that she joins, you look at her stats, you look at her class, she's not great. However, outside of a vacuum, think about the maps in which Cyrene is going to be usable. You know, River of Regrets, you probably don't recruit her in River of Regrets. If you do, she can potentially help with, like, rescue chaining a boss killer, but honestly, if you're spending enough time that Cyrene turns blue, you're probably fucked, because you need to warp skip that map. So that doesn't really count. The next map, the Egg map, she has just enough strength to be able to one-round eggs with, like, javelins and shit, right? If they're, you know, 10 HP eggs. But being just, like, another flyer able to, that you get for free, another promoted flyer able to just, like, break eggs is incredibly valuable. Now, obviously, you have Tana, you have Cormag, you have Vanessa, and they're probably going to be better at it, but just, if maybe you didn't train Tana because Vanessa is better, maybe you didn't recruit Cormag because you went Erica route, I think Cyrene is incredibly valuable for that reason. Obviously not, like, where does that leave us? Because that's really the only map where she's useful. You know, Last Hope, you're probably going to warp skip, and if you're not warp skipping, she's not especially useful, and if you are warp skipping, she's not useful. Darkling Woods, she can be good for a warp skip, because again, it's another promoted flyer you get for free. But fairly replaceable. You probably don't need more than 1 or 2 promoted flyers for your warp skip, and she's not going to be a good flyer for the boss killer for the warp skip. If you have, like, both Vanessa and Cormag, or both Tana and Vanessa or something, you know, she's not very useful there. She can be if you know, in an Iron Man setting or a draft setting, she's good in that regards. But, yeah, and then, same deal for inside the temple. You know, she could potentially help to rescue drop for a warp skip, but you've got other candidates for that. In this playthrough, though, she was my only flyer, and that utility was phenomenal. Like, obviously it came late, but she was my only flyer in the egg cracking map. So, like, suddenly that skyrockets her from just another flyer to the flyer. I guess Myr was a flyer, but, like, wasting Dragonstone use to pop an egg just felt really bad. Plus, she's got less movement than an unpromoted Pegasus. Like, she's got foot unit movement. And then Cyrene was even able to help out, like, we didn't warp skip Darkling Woods, but she was able to help out by the fact that she could be on the mountains, and she could fly. So I think she is C tier, because her late deployment, or her late recruitment, right, her availability really, really, really hurts her, but she... I would argue you could even possibly put her at the very bottom of B tier, but I don't want to make it, like, B tier so lopsided. So instead we just have 3-2, 3-2, 1-3. That's less lopsided. She was definitely better than Renak. In fact, I think I might put Renak... No, I'll keep Renak at C. I was like... Because the Draco Shield is good. The Draco Shield is good. That's my tier list, and if you disagree, you're wrong. Ross is better than Seth.